Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, red.olaughlin here on USA Global TV and Radio Network Talking Heads program. And today we are section 3 out of 6 on weight management. And weight management really means the science of losing weight, for lack of a more specific title. We're going into what causes things to happen and what can we do about it. Let me get my first slide up here. Let's go. Okay, fantastic. I am a researcher, never been associated with the medical field, pharmaceutical industry. I fell in love with chemistry at a very young age, got a degree in it, got an invitation to Vietnam, never had a chance to practice it. Until maybe 10 years ago, my wife came down with cancer, and as part of my deal as a caregiver was to try to figure out what could I do to help offset some of the side effects. So I got back involved in doing some research. I started down at the cellular level in the body, and I actually found things that worked. So I kind of developed this cause and effect relationship. I had been working in my civilian job prior to that as a failure analysis person, where I would research, well, why did it fail? Okay, well, why did that fail? Okay, fine. Why did that fail? So you get down about 7 levels of why, and you're at a root cause. Well, I kind of took that same aspect of thinking and said, why don't we do that same thing for our disease? Well, why do we say, I don't know what causes cancer. I don't know what causes Alzheimer's. Well, at some point in time, something had to cause something. That last card was, or last domino was tipped over by another domino prior to that. Well, what is it? And that's what I do. That's why I spend my time researching, looking specifically at what can we do with regard to why things happen. And in the topic of weight or headaches or blood pressure or cancer, Alzheimer's, there's so many things out there. There's not one single thing that says you fix this, that's going to get rid of Alzheimer's. You fix this, you'll never have another headache. Well, there's so many competing priorities within our body that you can't really and truly give a single reason. And that's what we went over last week. You know, we hear the old standard, well, calories in equals calories out. You know, a pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So if you exercise 500 calories more or cut 500 calories out, that's right for black and white on the chalkboard. But that's not what happens. We went over a lot of things last week that talked about why do these things not work, or why does this person's expertise work and these other ones don't. Anyway, basically I found confusion reigns. There's no doubt about it. So moving on up. Now, a major thing happened between last week and this week. I started out last week and had a pretty decent week in losing about 5 pounds or so. But Monday was my 55th wedding anniversary. In the process of getting everything ready, other than garlic bread and mashed potatoes, which probably wouldn't affect me very much. I also made a cherry pie. I also made a German chocolate cake. My wife made some ice cream, salted caramel ice cream. And I made some macarons. And I had a strawberry white chocolate ganache filling. Anyway, so there was a little bit of pigging out. And anytime that you're on a primary low carb diet. You eat some carbs for a single meal, generally speaking, not a problem. Never see it. But you do it for 2 meals or 3 meals, a couple days, whatever. And then all of a sudden you start getting a little water weight back. I was on Atkins diet for years and years, many years ago. I'll talk about toward the end of the show today. But I'd go down to Italy from Germany where I was living. I'd pig out for a weekend, gain 12, 14 pounds, come back, lose it again in 2 weeks and back to normal, mostly water weight. So what I have here is in the last week, I gained 0.7 pounds, not quite a pound, up a little bit on body fat and BMI. And the orange and the red are areas they say, yeah, red, I'm definitely higher than I need to be. Orange, I'm approaching that upper limit. The green areas, really no changes. The same thing with the dark green, the really good areas. Again, my body age and visceral fat there. The subcutaneous fat and body fat, yeah, I definitely have a problem with that. So I'm working on it. But I'll be back on the major program. I have not really done a lot of exercise. I have not really gone on any prolonged fasting. I do fast about between 14, 18 hours a day on a general, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. But I'm very shortly probably be going on a 72 to 100, 120 hour fast here very quickly, and that'll also make a difference. But anyway, each week I'll be giving you my progress report. Let's get back into this thing. And I really want to look at the general equation for weight loss. And this is just about any nutritionist, any exercise guru. They're going to tell you calories in equals calories out. Well, if I asked you the question, which weighs more, a pound of feathers or a pound of gold? Well, you think we're dealing in the same thing. In reality, a pound of feathers weighs a lot more than a pound of gold because one measures in a certain kind of ounces. A pound of feathers uses the same 16 ounces in a pound that we all are familiar with. But in the troy measurement for those kinds of minerals, 12 ounces is a pound. So you have 12 ounces is 1 pound of gold and 16 ounces is 1 pound of feathers. But in calories, sort of the same thing happens. A calorie is not necessarily equal to another calorie is equal to another one. So we try to say the calories we eat with food can be equated to the calories you burn with exercise. But there's a sticky wicket in this whole thing. And it deals with metabolism and hormones. We learned last week that if you have any insulin present at all, forget about it. You're going to shut down all of the opportunity to burn any fat whatsoever. It will not happen. And cortisol and some other things there. So let's continue this thing. If I eat just carbs, I'm going to produce insulin. That's just the way the body works. That's the way we're hardwired. But what if I just ate proteins? What happens there? Well, in reality, the body's actually going to burn more calories to digest proteins than it will for carbs. And proteins stimulate three things, particularly associated with weight loss. One is this thing called GLP-1, CCK, and PYY. GLP-1, it's a glucan-like protein 1. It curbs hunger, and there's a couple of prescription drugs out there that mimic that particular aspect of GLP-1. But GLP-1, in the big scheme of things, yeah, it does increase insulin a little bit, but it reduces glucagon and delays gastric emptying. So we actually feel satisfied because we have stomach full. We're with less calories because it's not emptying as fast as we typically would. We don't need to refill it as quickly. So that's a good deal. So also looking at how can I increase my GLP-1? Well, natural sources include berberine, curcumin, cinnamon, and some other ones, soybean, resveratrol. You can have fermented products, your yogurt and sauerkraut and stuff like that, probiotics and prebiotics. But anything that improves our gut health is going to improve our overall ability to do everything. And my standard is if you're using curcumin or resveratrol, there are some additions to those minerals, usually a black pepper extract, although there's some phytosomes that also work very well, and they increase the bioavailability in the body, sometimes 1,000 or more percent. So you actually get the curcumin or the resveratrol into the cells where they need to be. But just taking curcumin, if it doesn't have the extra stimulating effect for getting more bioavailability, spend a couple extra dollars, a little extra time, and find out the stuff that will get right there where the rubber meets the road in the cells. Glucagon stimulates the liver to break down glycogen. That's the sugar in our converted from glucose into our muscles. That's what gives us our energy. It stimulates what they call gluconeogenesis, which we convert our amino acids from proteins into glucose. So if I'm not taking any carbs at all, there are some functions in the body that need a little bit of glucose. Well, glucagon is one of those ones that will help that part. It also helps on breaking down the stored fat. Our fat that we store in our cells is triglycerides. But the fat we actually burn in our body is from fatty acids. So that part works very well to help that part. The CCK, the cholecystokinin, it's a digestive hormone. It basically addresses how fast our stomach empties. So we're eating, and if everything passes through fine, great. But if I slow it down just a little bit, I'm full, I can't eat anymore, I stop eating. Well, sometimes we stop eating. But the CCK controls the digestive flow not only through the stomach, but also through the intestines. So sometimes you can get that stuff passing through super quick. Other times it seems like, well, it never gets through there. But it reduces our appetite. And that's a big deal. If our appetite is reduced, we're not going in and adding extra to it. So we talked last week about if I delay a little bit, if I eat the same 1,000 calories, but I spread it out over 4 meals, 5 meals, and I never give my bloodstream a chance to get rid of the insulin, I'm never going to start burning fat. But if I eat that 1,000 calories in one meal a day and I have 23 hours before the next meal, I have a lot of time to get rid of that insulin and start burning fat. And that's part of the issue with if I can reduce my appetite, that helps tremendously. PYY, polypeptide YY, it's an endocrine hormone, and it actually binds cells in the brain. After eating, not only does our stomach tell us we're full, but our brain tells us, that was a good meal. I really enjoyed that. You get that feeling of being full. The brain tells us that we're full, and we reduce our eating. So those are things that work very, very well to help us in the weight management and things. But getting back to calories, are we really just counting calories? 1,000 calories. What does that really mean? If it's all calories, well, I'm going to, over time, all I'm going to have is an amino acid deficiency and scurvy. Used to be for a long time, the Navy would put people on bread and water, U.S. Navy for lower 3 rates in the service, and that would be a 3-day punishment. It's actually better if you just went on water rather than bread and water, but that's a discussion for another day. But carbs only, not a great idea. But if you look at most of the experts out there, they're telling you you really need the carbs because you need the energy generation. Come on, give me a break. I can get energy generation from ketones, from my fat. Why do I need carbs? I still find it hard to believe nowadays that we are so still focused on, well, I got to have the whole grains. I got to have this. No, we don't. We really don't. But it's hard to break all these years of propaganda. So I went back and looked a little bit. Our first real food pyramid came around 1974. And about that same time, there was a court decision, Citizens United versus the FEC, 2010. And even though it was 2010, a lot of the stuff prior to that was in the midst, but it was actually codified in law that corporations can actually be people. And as such, they can contribute legally. Now, they've been doing it all along. But when you start having corporate donations, $1 million here, $1 million there, 10 million, 20 million, it gets people's attention. Okay, fine. I'll vote for that. And so you had a lot of the USDA guidelines that were influenced by corporations. So if I had big wheat or big rice or big meat or whoever it was, they're influencing what the USDA is telling us that we need to have. And if you look at the pyramid, that pyramid, what's at the bottom? The stuff we need all of, mostly grains. And the answer is wrong. We don't. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what actually happened. If you go back to why are people obese? We don't see that in our great grandparents or grandparents. But if you could actually put a date on it, 1776, 200 years later, 1976, Not that 200 years means anything, but for 200 years, we really did not have an obesity problem. Came through World War II, and then all of a sudden, science and everything else came. But in that window, the last part of the 70s, we started seeing changes in the American diet. And those changes in this Western eating mentality spread across the world. So what we're seeing, maybe didn't catch on in India or other countries as quickly, but if they started eating the American diet versus eating their indigenous diet from whatever country they were in, you started seeing huge increases in weight gain, fat accumulation. We started seeing what they called ultra processed foods. This UPF, these were things that are high in calories, high in sugar, high in salt, high in fat. We see, even though it's not the fat aspect of it, but we started seeing a lot of sugar sweetened beverages, but they weren't sweetened just with sugar. It's a high fructose corn syrup. And that was something that's much sweeter than sugar, but at lower cost. So you started seeing availability of products that manufacturers could use at a lower price. And because they tasted so good, it became a major issue with regard to the American public. They wanted more. So we look at obesity. It's defined as a BMI, body mass index, of anything 30, I think it's kilograms per square meter. But it's a number. And in reality, it should never be used to talk about an individual. Insurance companies use it, but they use it primarily for comparing populations. A lot of science is done with BMIs of this population versus that population. They start looking at the demographics, and it's fine for that. But you get, a football player who's, 6'1", 240 pounds, a lot of muscle. His BMI is going to be much, much higher than, another 6'1", 240 pounds who's never lifted a weight in his life. It's not a good measurement for an individual. But insurance companies use it nowadays for assessing things. Doctors' offices use it. But regardless, that's what we're stuck with. In the 70s, we generally saw an increase of less than around 0.5%. Nothing that was really major, but we have this magic period, 1976, when the obesity revolution started. And all of a sudden, from next 10, 20 years, we saw an increase 15 to 23%. An unbelievable amount. And then as it continues into the 2000 and beyond, now we're seeing almost 31%. And it's still continuing upward. It slowed down a little bit, but it's still continuing upward. So we're back in an area back in the early 70s. It wasn't an issue. But you look around today, it's a major issue. But everybody's still following the food pyramid. They're still following calories in versus calories out, and they're counting calories. And so we have to say, well, if I really believe that, I must be gaining weight because I'm exercising less or I'm eating more. And so they eat less, they exercise more, and they don't see any results. I'm not going to answer that question today, but I'm planning next week where I start honing in on metabolism, that I have a really good answer for why that's happening. But regardless, we're going to continue down the road we're on today. And several people come up, well, it must be the fat. If you're getting more weight gain, it has to be higher fat because you're eating more fat. And so fat became, the main nemesis. Let's not talk about grains. Let's not talk about carbs. It has to be fat. And then they started finding, well, people who were overweight had heart problems. So therefore, the higher fat must be the cause of obesity. No, not necessarily. And so because high fat and obesity were linked together, we came out with this mindset of, okay, let's have low fat. We'll have low fat foods, low fat this, whatever it may happen to be. And so the low fat popularity was born. But when you actually get down and you study people and records of people who have been on these things, there was no real impact of the higher fat that they were on compared to the lower fat. But with the advent of that lower fat and the mentality of it, the advent of more availability, lower prices, we started seeing fast food restaurants just blossom. Vending machines had more things in them that we could even imagine, but it was all providing a lot of risky foods, a lot loaded with carbohydrates, sugar, salt, etc. But these ultra processed foods also are responsible for a lot of health issues. They may not have realized it at the beginning, but 20 years down the road, when you start looking at things, yeah, obesity is becoming rampant, heart disease going out of control, hypertension is ubiquitous, diabetes, cancer, all these things are increasing. And if you had to put a finger on what it was at the starting point, to me, it's the ultra processed foods. It's what we see 90% of when you walk into a grocery store, all those shelves with all the packages and everything you walk by. That's where we start seeing the salt, the sugar. These are all added things, the fat, the artificial colorings, the flavorings, these toxins, the sweeteners, the stabilizers, the preservatives. All these things are in these ultra processed foods, and those things affect our bodies in a many, many, many negative ways. They're relatively easy to avoid. Just buy fresh this, fresh that. But on the foods, never go by what's on the outside label. You're seeing something low this, low that. No, don't trust them. It's a marketing ploy. They sell a lot of stuff because they hook you in. Gluten free. Well, it may never have had gluten in its life, but they're using the gluten fad as part of that. But read the labels. Become a master at knowing what are you getting. And just because it says it's 4 grams of this, how many servings per package are there? If there's 12 servings per package and there's 4 grams per, 12 times 4, 48. Way, way, way more than you probably need for a healthy living. So if I'm looking at the issue of fats, well, fats has kind of a negative attitude, but in reality, we have healthy fats and we have unhealthy fats. Saturated fats have taken a major bloody nose for a long time, and they primarily focus it at meats, your meat products. We have unsaturated fats and trans fats. Trans fats, absolutely a problem. We have our unsaturated fats. You got the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and they're generally considered good. But we have lots of problems with both ends of the spectrum. If you have the unsaturated, yeah, it does lower cholesterol and LDL, but I could take that same saturated fat from a medium chain triglyceride, such as red palm oil or coconut oil. It's a saturated plant fat, not a saturated animal fat, but they get all lumped into the same saturated end of things. Now, omega-3s really do help reduce heart plaque and the risk associated with cardiovascular disease. And if you had to look and say, yeah, mono unsaturated fats are probably the best. So I got my omega-3s, I got my omega-6s, I got my omega-9s. So if I'm looking at omega-6s, omega-3s, omega-9s, lots of things out there that can be confusing. But in a nutshell, I'd like to have the same amount of omega-3s and omega-6 because our bodies can't make it. We have to get it from the foods we eat. Omega-9s from olive oil, not something our body makes. It can use it, not a big deal. But when you get into a Mediterranean diet, that's one of the things that they say helps you tremendously. But the low-fat diet, that should be LDF, but low-fat diet, is it healthy? No. You get the same calories in a low-fat diet, but you end up with more salt and more sugar. Same thing with gluten-free. If you with a gluten-free product, probably you have more sugar, more salt, more other things that you don't want just to avoid gluten. But it tastes good. The low-fat diet, a lot of health concerns, particularly when you stay on it for a long period of time. Brain cognition issues, you get poor vitamin absorption, increased issues with cancer, cardiovascular risk, hormone imbalance, diabetes, depression, anxiety, all those risks go up. And also to gain weight. Weight goes up when you're on a low-fat diet. Doesn't make sense, but it happens. Okay, I mentioned a minute ago, the omega-6s and 3s, they're essential fatty acids. We got to have them, no doubt about it. But if you get too many omega-6s, and that's most of your plant vegetable oils, they are the omega-6s. The omega-3s come from your seafood and stuff. But the issue is that if I get too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s, that omega-6 becomes inflammatory in the body. So the best case scenario is a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. I can go up to them 4-to-1. In other words, I have 4 times as many omega-6s as 3s. Body doesn't care. Everything's happy. You start getting to the standard American diet, it might be 20 to 1, 30 to 1. All of a sudden, that extra omega-6 becomes highly inflammatory in the body. Disease starts at a constant low level cellular constant chronic inflammation. So if I keep that inflammatory effect going down to the cellular level, meal after meal after meal after meal with no rest, I do have increased chances of a lot of diseases. I mentioned a second ago, don't trust any of the labeling on the front of any package. It's there. It's a marketing ploy. Read the labels and understand. Talked about the essential fatty acids. Our body can't make them, but we need them. Lots of myths out there with regard to saturated fats, heart disease. Just Google myths and saturated fats, myths and proteins, myths and carbs, myths and health, myths and cardiovascular disease. Lots and lots and lots of studies out there that show it's not the boogeyman that people think it is. And again, it's like almost anything else. Moderation is really what we need to be looking at, and not necessarily counting or whole other things. Back in about 1994, I had been in the reserves. I went back on active duty for about 6 years. And at that point in time, I needed to get better control over my weight. I'd been an aviator for 16 years, a few years prior to that, and I had a reason to keep my weight to where it needed to be, and that's because I needed to fly. I had to be no greater than a certain amount. And so I was pretty diligent. You get away from it from a few years, I'm still getting a flight physical every year. I haven't missed a physical since 1968. I get one every year. But the physicals are fine, but there's no, if I've been 2 years since I took my flying, I'm no longer flying, and I'm a little overweight, I don't get penalized by not being able to fly, regardless. So I was looking for something not only to help me health-wise, but I also wanted to look better. And so Atkins, okay, fine, I read 5 books on Atkins before I ever started the diet. I didn't think the risks were anywhere near what I needed. And within months, I'm talking seriously, 4 or 5 months, boom, lost 7 inches off my waist, 40 plus pounds. And it was fun. I loved it. I mean, there wasn't anything about that diet I didn't like. And I kept the weight off forever and ever and ever, it seemed like. But the only thing I noticed was that when I used to be able to go out and run 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 miles, I really had problems running 2 miles, even getting to 2 miles. That was a major problem. I just could not get the stamina to the endurance. Let me back up a second here. But another thing that I found after I got retired from the military is I went in to get a bone density test. I said, "Oh, it should be a piece of cake. I've been lifting weights for decades, been running. I'm in pretty good shape." I get in there and also I find out I'm osteopenia. And I'm thinking, there's no way in the world, with everything I've done, with what I understood at that time, that I could have any problems with that. Well, it turns out that when you're on an Atkins diet, if you actually stay within the purview of the diet and have the green leafy vegetables and everything else, you stand a better chance of not becoming osteopenia. What happens is the body becomes acidic. And when your body's acidic from protein and fat and carbohydrates, but the carbohydrates aren't there. What is alkaline is your fruits and vegetables. I wasn't eating fruits and vegetables on my Atkins diet. I was having burgers and eggs and steak and fish and cheese, everything that was good tasting, bacon, all of those things were great, but I wasn't eating any fruits and vegetables. So my body was acidic. I started leaching calcium from my bones to my bloodstream to keep my body in a normal range of blood pH. And over time, it just leached a lot of calcium out of my bones, which made me osteopenia. Well, you have to go back the other way. You just can't take calcium and expect it to get back to the bones. It doesn't work that way. You have to have magnesium. You have to have vitamin D3. You have to have vitamin K2 to get the calcium back into the bones. And then you got to maintain your pH in order to keep it there. It's not a difficult equation, but most of us have no concept of what really requires to keep strong, healthy bones. We don't even know how to measure our pH of our body. Lots of easy things to do. And as we go along, we're going to learn more about that. So let me go ahead. Next week, I plan on getting a little bit into metabolism and answer a lot of questions that we kind of alluded to today. But go to Amazon, My books are available there. No matter what you can do, it addresses the subconscious mind, what controls 95% of what you do, and especially when you're trying to lose weight. It's just not a simple matter saying, I'm not going to eat this piece of pie, because your body doesn't process the conscious mind with what the conscious, unconscious mind, subconscious mind processes. The Joy of Ageless Health talks about the primary causes of disease and what you can do about it. Longevity Secrets for Healthy Aging, again, talks about primarily the two major causes of aging and what you can do to accelerate or decelerate the aging process. Earlier this year, I came out with Understanding the Causes of Alzheimer's Disease. And this is a compilation of over 40 articles I've written over the last few years that goes into a lot of detail about progress that's been made in identifying causes of Alzheimer's and what generally kind of works most of the time to stop that. And my latest book is, in a nutshell, how to write and publish your book for free. And that's really what it boils down to. I talk about all the things that an author should consider, not only to get the book written, but at the lowest possible cost in time and in money. Those are the things there. So I appreciate you joining me this week. This program's available in the USA Global TV and Radio Network on YouTube in the archive. Next week, we'll have section 4 on weight management, and we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of what really controls the burning of carbs or the burning of fat and what we can do about it. So until next week, I really appreciate you joining me. Red.Olaughlin signing out. Thank you.